So I will convene and call to order the regular Oregon City Commission meeting for Wednesday, February 6th, 2019, I'm sorry. It's now 7:20. We're kind of waiting on Commissioner Smith to take care of his employment obligation. So with that, you can call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Rachel Lyles Smith. Here. Mayor Holliday.
Here. Please stand and join me in flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so I have two appointments to make. Appointing Jeff Sargent, a non-resident, and Derek Kugel, a city resident, Caulfield Neighborhood Association, to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for a 3-year term of February 6, 2019 to December 31st, 2021. Now is the time for citizen comment for things that are not on the agenda. Do we have anyone?
Betty Mum.
Oh, of course. Commissioner Mum.
Nail it.
Smile and wave, huh? Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Betty Mum, Oregon City. I'm here tonight to express my concerns about the community room being eliminated at the police court facility. So I was wondering if maybe you had considered at some point putting a community room at the new Public Works facility. I think it's important that we have, I know I'm looking for John, I'm not looking at John. I think it's important to have a community meeting room that is up on the hill so that our neighborhoods can have access to it. I understand that it's not that far to drive down the hill, but we have a hard enough time getting neighbors to attend our meetings. I think personally Barkley Hills would have more people if we weren't meeting at the cemetery, although we do appreciate that. Although we do appreciate the space, but I just think that it's a big disappointment, and I was on the commission when that was, when we purchased the property up there. And not asking for a room named after me, but hey, come on, a community room, tables and chairs. That's all. Thank you.
There is a community space at Beaver Creek Telephone too, by the way.
There will be no comment.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, moving on. Is everybody okay with the agenda?
In total? Or are you talking about the consent
The
agenda?
general agenda?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, moving on. I'm going to change the agenda a little bit. There's some question about item 8B, PC 19-012, resolution 19-04, conditional support for the Oregon City Schools request to expand the urban growth boundary. I'm going to pull that up right now, and we'll hear from Ms. Troy.
Thank you very much. The school district we had a work session this month, and the school district would like to submit a resolution to conditionally support an urban growth boundary expansion for approximately 32 acres north of Holcomb Elementary School. The resolution talks about general support. The support is conditioned on that site being utilized for a school. The city's general support, should this resolution be approved, doesn't evaluate it against the metro requirements for urban growth boundary expansion. We know there are a lot of steps to development, and in this particular case, this is Metro's process to determine should the urban growth boundary be expanded. After that, then there are multiple other processes in which we identify what the impacts of this development would be, including annexation, rezoning, and development itself. And so with each one of those steps, there's opportunity for public comment. The applicant is here to answer any questions as well.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Did we determine at our work session, I see Carrie is here, did we determine if our condition that we wanted to put on that application was legal and is allowable as far as expanding the urban growth boundary. If it doesn't happen, then it can be removed. There's
Sure.
a process for that.
Yeah, OAR 660-024-0070 provides the criteria by which a local government or metro can remove land from the urban growth boundary. So there is a process, and I actually did talk to the Metro City Attorney about that process and using it, and it hasn't happened before, but it could be done. And so we tried to provide a 10-year period so that there was sort of a time-certain deadline for accomplishing that in the event that the land isn't annexed and developed pursuant to their plan.
Commissioner Smith?
That would be a process for the city to go through or the school district to go through?
It would be a process that Metro would go through.
This requires the school district to take it out of the urban growth boundary if it doesn't, if
Okay,
it's
so
not used for a school
The
within
school
10 years.
district would then go to Metro and go through that process?
So
Okay.
we did determine it can't automatically happen. It has to go through the de-annexation, or whatever that's called, for urban growth
It's
boundary.
sort of a de-designation process, just like a designation process.
Commissioner O'Donnell, you have anything?
No, that was my primary question, the mechanism and how it's accomplished, and is it an automatic or, it's obviously not an automatic. I understood whose responsibility it was. I have other issues about location and size and service area and future city growth, and, if we take a downswing, what do we do? But the obligation falls upon the school district to do this. I'm not totally comfortable with it because, we've got opinions that this is what'll happen, but we've never seen it happen before and don't know if it could happen. And so that's why I wanted to pull it from the consent agenda, and that's why we're having this discussion.
So is there a motion?
Not by me.
And this doesn't, our general support of it doesn't mention anything about city services.
That was another concern of mine. Thank you.
No, in fact, section 2 of the resolution says, city staff has not studied what effect construction of a
Right.
new middle school will have on existing city facilities and services. Therefore, this resolution shall not be construed as providing any indication of the city's ability to serve this area. And the plan is that, the conversations I've had with the school district so far are that as soon as they have an application ready, they will send it to us and we will take a look at it, and then we will provide the service provider letter that we feel comfortable that we can provide. If that letter says, we don't know, then that's what it's gonna say. If we do know that we can serve this area, then we'll say that. But I suspect, for example, with transportation, I don't know whether we're gonna know, because I haven't seen the application. So all this does is say, we understand the concept, we're okay with it, but we don't know very much.
So the sequence of events is supposing they successfully brought in the UGB. The next steps would be what,
Annexation.
Then the next steps would be an evaluation of our services able to
As
provide.
part of the annexation, we would evaluate our services at that time, and then we will have the zoning that will happen, because right now it's got county zoning, so it's gonna have some city zone designation. And then there'll be the conditional use approval for the school, and then it will be built. So there are at least 2, maybe 3 steps from a land use planning perspective where we'll know more and evaluate more, I think.
And as I understand it, they're probably at least 5 years out from construction, right?
That's my recollection of what they were.
They're nodding.
Is there a motion?
Mayor?
What?
Sorry, I just wanted to again state that I am an employee of the Oregon City School District.
So you're declaring a potential conflict, is that it?
Well, if anyone, I just mentioned that to the public in case there's an issue with that. That's all I need to do, right?
Okay. So is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 19-04, conditional support for the Oregon City School District request to expand the urban growth boundary.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Call a roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
I believe I'll abstain.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye. Motion carries. So we'll go back to the regular order now. Hang on one second. What was that last thing?
6A.
Oh, yeah, okay. So we're on to public hearings, PC 19-015, Development Code Amendments, including equitable housing, planning file LEG 18-00001. Commissioner, or Director Turway.
Thank you very much. As you recall, we have our code amendments, which do include equitable housing. With that package, we broke it up into 5 segments. This is our second one of those segments. We'll continue. We have an agenda that identifies which topic will be discussed at each meeting, though there is public comment allowed at all of them. The public comment can talk about any item in the package. We will just be announcing the topics related on the agenda. So Pete Walter, our planner, can walk you through it.
So before you go, Pete, so to be clear, as we're in the process of appointing a new city commissioner, replace Commissioner Ide, we will be pushing back after tonight, the next meeting or two, until we get a replacement commissioner on board to look at the rest of this stuff before we vote on it. So we will not be discussing this at is it February 20th?
Yeah, we've updated our schedule to reflect not having it at the February 20th.
Okay, all right, thank you. Go ahead, Pete.
Good evening, commissioners. As the City Commission is continuing your review of the amendments, we'll be discussing the next set of zoning and design standards for high-density commercial mixed-use zones. And we're compiling a list of topics to be considered for direction and tentatively moving towards adoption in late April, early May. At the last hearing, we reviewed the low and medium density designations and the various residential types and standards for those areas. And for this discussion, we're focusing on housing types in the high density mixed use and commercial comprehensive plan designations. And this includes the residential high density designation, which is the R2 zone. And that will see a modest increase in the range of housing types allowed, as well as the mixed-use corridor and downtown zones. So this chart illustrates what we're looking at this evening. The principal changes for types of housing in these high-density areas allows additional uses, and that includes allowing accessory dwelling units and internal conversions for existing single-family homes in those zones. And adding new uses such as cluster housing, duplexes, and townhouses. And we'll also be discussing shelters, but not tonight. We'll be discussing shelters in more detail on March 20th. So with these new unit types comes a minimum density requirement to assure that that land is used efficiently. And commercial and mixed-use areas would continue to allow live, work, 3 to 4 plexes and multifamily use like they do now. So no residential uses are proposed for our employment and industrial land zones. So allowing single-family homes in these areas to add additional uses such as accessory dwelling units and ADUs and internal conversions would allow reinvestment and additional housing opportunities until these sites go through a complete change of use to commercial or mixed use. And this could provide greater flexibility in how those properties are redeveloped. We discussed the standards for these units at the last meeting, so I'm not going to go into those.
So this picture you have up, that's the house next to the
That's all.
Mitchell, is that right? Okay,
Correct.
all right, thanks.
Yeah.
The proposed changes to the standards for ADUs and internal conversions are help to implement statewide regulations and generally expand opportunities to do more with existing housing stock. And as you know, we've been debating the owner occupancy requirement and the off-street parking requirements, and we're going to be deciding those later on. In addition to the apartments that are allowed in this zone, we're adding duplexes, townhouses, and cluster housing as new permitted uses. And those additional units, basically what it means is this is no longer an apartments-only zone. You'd have minimum density requirements, and if you are going to propose strictly multifamily or apartments, we are adding a potential for a density bonus if all of these units would be affordable units. And that is defined as units that are affordable at 80% of area median income for a minimum term of 30 years. And a developer could add up to 2 market rate dwellings for each affordable unit provided. Additionally, 3 to 4 plexes are newly defined residential type permitted in the R2 and mixed-use zones, and a variety of configurations is possible. Design standards similar to townhomes are the same as for the low and medium density zones. And a type 1 review process will assure compliance with design for 3 to 4 plexes. We're now going to talk about multifamily standards, which will continue to be a permitted use in these zones. Before we do that, we also have live-work units in our code, and the proposed changes to the live-work units are fairly minimal. We are proposing to allow live-work units in the medium-density zones, which are R5 and R35, and there would be a conditional use in the high-density residential zone. There's also currently a deed restriction pertaining to live-work units that the Planning Commission recommended removing.
That would be for new developments only?
Pardon?
Was that removal of that restriction, was that for new developments only or for
It
existing?
would be for new developments, yes.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that.
Multifamily housing be defined now as 5 or more units rather than 3 or more units, because we have 3 to 4 plexes as a new unit type, with clarified design standards that would apply through a type 2 site plan and design review process, just like it does now. And the Planning Commission recommended a variety of changes to simplify open space, parking, landscaping, and building design. And today, the code, we're going to talk about the combination of multifamily and commercial design standards. Today, the code includes many design standards pertaining to both multifamily and commercial and mixed-use buildings that are very similar, as listed here. And these proposed changes would combine and streamline these standards where appropriate, while continuing certain development or use-specific requirements, such as ground floor transparency and those sorts of things. A variety of procedural improvements within the site plan and design review process is proposed, and expanding on the very successful, clear and objective Type 1 minor site plan review process. 3 to 4 plexes and townhomes, which are single-family units, would be reviewed for compliance unless associated with a concurrent higher-level review, such as a land division or a zone change.
Hey, Pete, can you go back a second?
Sure.
So there's a bottom bullet point there that confused me.
Okay.
Truck stops on transit streets.
Yeah, okay, so we have an exemption proposal. Right now, the code requires that truck stops on transit streets meet all of the commercial and mixed-use design standards, but the nature of those developments and the way they lay it out makes it.
What is a truck stop?
Oh, like a transit stop, like a big highway over-the-road transportation stop, truck stop. It's not really defined.
It's a really old reference in
It's
our
a really
code,
old
to be
reference,
honest.
yeah.
And it says that if you're a truck stop, you don't have to meet transit street requirements. So it
Yeah,
exempts
so you
it from meeting transit street requirements. Transit street requirements means if you're on a street with a bus on it or transit, that you have to face the street, have an entranceway facing the street. If you're on a corner, you're in the corner. So it's more design stuff. So it was a very specific
So far, I'm more
exemption.
confused now than when I asked the question, so.
It's a really old code that's,
Fortunately, we don't use it.
we don't have a lot of truck stops.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a reference to an old use that we really don't
Then why
have
don't we
right
just get
now.
rid of it?
The planning commission did not they're getting rid of the exemption for it. So they are essentially getting rid of it.
All right,
It's exempt from the code now, and they're taking it out of the code.
okay,
Just won't confuse anybody anymore.
all right, moving on.
Well, a quick question on exemptions from design standards for structures under 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not listed here. Is parking one of them, or is that not considered a design standard?
Parking is considered separately. Then we
Okay,
have to
good.
get
All right,
specific
thank you.
approval from either planning commission.
So it would
thank
be
you.
like if you had a storage shed at an apartment complex or something like that, doesn't really need to have as much windows as the building does and orientation.
Aesthetically, okay, thank you.
Yeah, good clarification. So in the, the current process allows, exists in the current code, but needed more specificity. And so what this code section does is allow the planning director to approve certain site-specific development standards without having to go for a full variance or an adjustment to the planning commission. And previously, this provision applied to any site-specific development standard. And what we've proposed here is just that it applies to these very specific things: vehicle connections to adjoining properties, on-site pedestrian circulation, et cetera. And this is it's basically a staff level modification. The developer or the builder has to show that the modification meets the design intent. So they have to show that any reduction in transparency, for example, is offset by some other form of site improvement, or parking lot landscaping reduction is going to be, mitigated some other way. But it's a staff level review, and it allows for a little more expedited review of certain projects.
So can I just add one thing on that? So this is one of the cases where we think we're adding transparency, but we might make it slightly harder for development, because what the code says now is meet the letter of the code. If not, you can do an adjustment, and it doesn't really specify what you can do an adjustment for. This code amendment says you can only do this certain type of adjustment without a public hearing for the things on the list. And so we're narrowing the scope of authority for what we can do as staff, but it leads to a more transparent process for applicants and neighbors.
Okay.
So with respect to changes to zoning districts in general, there's a variety of clarifications and additions to the lists of permitted uses and revisions to certain problematic dimensional standards. One issue of debate by the Planning Commission was the decision to not permit 3 to 4 plexes in the historic commercial district. Another issue of importance for the Planning Commission was the discussion about height limits in the mixed-use downtown district. So currently, the mixed-use downtown allows a height limit of 75 feet, except in certain areas. And those are in the downtown design district along the traditional Main Street. There's a height limit of 58 feet. And then for these next 3 bullets, there is a height restriction of 45 feet when you are adjacent to single-family residential or within 250 feet of the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center, or in the area indicated on the map, which is the area that's between 11th and 16th and McLaughlin Boulevard in Maine.
Why would we want to limit the height to 45 feet in that particular space?
So the main reason for these limits, as we understand it, has to do with compatibility of development with existing structures, as well as preservation of views. There was a great deal of discussion about this by the Planning Commission. We had originally recommended removing the 45-foot height limit, with the exception of the EOT. And the EOT height limit, for example, was one of the reasons that the hotel mixed-use project at 17th and Washington had to request an adjustment from the Development Code in 2017 in order to build a 5-story hotel and mixed-use project in the floodplain.
So if we do this now, does that change anything about the hotel?
No,
Okay.
no.
So what is the origin of that bullet point number 3, which is 45 feet within 250 feet of the OT? Does that come from some other document?
Well, it is a long history there.
Can you give me a Reader's Digest version?
It w-
Part of it is because it's view from the highway of the end of the Oregon Trail building. It's the hoops. It's a view from the highway of seeing that building as part of it.
Yeah. With respect to certain parts of these amendments, we're dealing with trying to resolve unintended consequences that could potentially constrain development and reinvestment in the downtown zone. Especially given that many redevelopment sites within the MUD zone also have to build above the floodplain. That said, these are areas that are important to the Planning Commission as well, as far as preserving views towards the river and compatibility with existing structures.
So, hang on.
Yep.
So I'm gonna go back to this stretch on Main Street. This doesn't make any sense to me. If we're trying to get more density downtown, if we're trying to get more residential downtown, which I think we've all agreed at some point or another, that that's one of the things we want to try to do to continue the redevelopment of downtown. And I'm looking at this particular 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 block section. It's all car dealership.
I want to acknowledge one thing in this map. Staff's suggestion was to keep it at 75 feet. Again, there's a lot of discussion at Planning Commission. Views seem to be the thing that came up. In this map of property, there is the property on 12th and Main, which is the gravel parking lot that the city owns. Just so it's very transparent.
Right, but I think the point I'm making here is that, so you have the gravel parking lot, and then I believe it's Active Water Sports or something else as you move down that stretch. But most of it is parking lot for the car dealerships, which eventually, at some point, is gonna go away as that land becomes too valuable to be parking cars on. But I don't know how you're gonna block views to anybody else, because the fact is that when you get up onto Center Street, they're way above that 75-foot limit, and the stuff down here behind here is all light business stuff. So I'm curious why we restrict ourselves to a 45-foot height in this particular spot. It doesn't make any sense to me.
The Planning Commission acknowledged the height of the bluff changes along this area. It's taller in some places and shorter in others.
I actually think I remember seeing that conversation on TV, and I think it had to do with those buildings on this outside of the blue area, but adjacent to it, to give them a view, an unrestricted view. And I thought that's what the rationale was. I thought that's what I heard at that point.
Well, my confusion is that the building, so we've got basically 3 blocks in them. So you have the main block along McLaughlin Boulevard, the central block, all right, which is, there is no residential there. It's all some kind of commercial or light industrial, whether we're talking about Miles Fiberglass and Plastics at 15th, and all the way back down. And then you got the train tracks, the train trestle. So what kind of a view are you blocking?
Looking over the river, and we're talking about current state, maybe a possible different future state, I think. I'm trying to relate to you the discussion I thought I heard.
No,
watching
I
that.
get it, and I just don't understand it, because you were talking about the blocks that are on the east side of Center Street. Okay, so they're on the east side of the train trestle.
And they're elevated, right?
The train trestle elevated, none of the buildings there are elevated.
The views up here.
And there's no residential there.
The views on the top.
So why would we limit ourselves on this block on Main Street to protect something that doesn't even exist now?
A lot of the conversation from the Planning Commission was on Center Street, the desire to see the water.
That's what I recall.
And I would challenge anybody to go down there now and stand on a 12-foot ladder and see if you can see the river.
Just passing along the Planning Commission's discussion.
That's a
I
journey.
mean, if I put myself in a boom lift and got to 45 feet, you probably couldn't see the river.
Like some site.
Yeah, we did, during the Planning Commission had a robust conversation about this. And we did a lot of sightline studies and things like that and elevations.
All right, well, I'm gonna leave this on the
Yeah.
discussion table.
So just to be clear on what the
That's-
planning
that's-
commission
yeah.
actually did, so they retained the existing code that we have for everything except for our code now says if you're within 100 feet of an existing dwelling, then you get that 45-foot height. They changed it to say adjacent to an existing dwelling.
The 58 feet in the core downtown is based on Masonic Lodge? Is that the height of Masonic Lodge?
That's what I've heard.
Ish?
Yeah, it'd be,
Close enough.
But we're not
It's
going
around-
over it.
It was not
Yeah.
to be taller than,
Right. Perfect.
and that's a holdover.
Yeah.
Mr. Ray, so are you proposing, this says 45 feet within 250 feet of the EOT. The current draft code says within 500 feet of the EOT.
Oh, yes, it's 500 feet.
It's 500 feet.
Sorry.
I think the staff recommendation from your email to me was 250 feet.
Yeah, it's not proposed to change from 500. That's a mistake on the slide.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So this is the topic that's just gonna come back for discussion, right?
Right.
So what is,
So it is 500, right?
it is
Correct.
500.
500.
I am reading it now. It's 500.
and from whence do you measure that?
Tax lot to tax lot.
Huh?
Tax lot boundary to tax lot boundary,
Yeah.
two-dimensionally, so.
Okay. Moving on.
So the handful of items that were of most importance for discussion with the planning commission are the one regarding height limits, and the combination of standards for commercial and multifamily and whether those were appropriate. The type 2 modifications that we discussed and narrowing that applicability, and then the removing the 3 to 4 plexes as an allowable use in the historic commercial zone.
And where's the historic commercial zone? Is that just downtown?
That's the Kenema district along 99E.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's it.
that's it.
All right.
So I have a couple of slides after this that just tell the public what's next, but our recommendation is to continue to March 6th.
Can you go back to that one?
Yeah.
Would you like to keep all of these on the list or?
Hang on, we're
are there
not done
some-
yet.
Pardon? Sorry.
That was the staff report. We're in a public hearing.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for clarifying.
So on March 6th, this is the list of items that I'll be discussing, and that includes a great variety of things, including public work standards, shelters, mobile food carts, et cetera. March 20th, we're basically talking about procedures and improvements to those.
So hang on.
Yeah.
We're not, the timeline for selecting the new commissioner gets us to an appointment prior to the March 20th meeting, is that right?
Should.
Yeah.
So I think we should push this March 6th meeting back to the March 20th meeting and the March 20th meeting back into April so that we can have as much of this discussion with the new commissioner as possible. Anybody have a problem with that?
None whatsoever.
I thought we were gonna have a new commissioner by this meeting. by
No,
the
we're,
6th.
no, it's not. Right, Katie?
I think it,
You can vote on it prior to the 6th at the interviews, but the interviews will take place either the 25th or the 28th of February. And so you could vote that night, but you would still need them to do an oath of office
on
at the 6th
Sixth.
meeting. Or you could vote at the 6th meeting and have them do an oath of office, or you could, but basically they could come on board right after the oath of office and sit up here as far as getting them up to speed on all the information prior to that.
There you go.
Yeah.
What's the pleasure of the commission here? Do you think we can get that work done prior to this March 6th meeting? I personally don't think we would have a problem doing that,
I
but
don't either, but I'd like to have them enough time to look through some of that stuff too.
Sure.
But I mean, I would hope that people that are applying would be already looking at all this.
yeah,
It should be.
yeah. All right, so let's leave this beyond the February 20th meeting. We can leave the rest of the schedule on.
Okay. So March 20th would continue to be procedural improvements, and April 3rd, final direction from the city commission on these items, including any others that come up. So things that have yet to be resolved include the residential design standards for the Park Place and South End concept plan, and how alleys requirements factor into that as well. We're talking about the minimum parking for ADUs and internal conversions, the owner occupancy requirement for accessory dwelling units, as well as the age limit for internal conversions, the minimum lot size for manufactured housing parks, and the minimum flag lot pole widths for cluster housing. And then we would have a tentative decision then. Staff is putting together a survey for the South End and Park Place neighborhood associations and the people that live in the urban growth boundary for the concept plan areas that will ask them directly with the help of a lot of visual aids and pictures of houses, what kind of garage orientation and what kind of design standards they really prefer, and whether or not these citywide design standards should take the place of these concept plan area specific design standards. And we hope to come back to you with, some good feedback from the neighborhood associations through that, as well as via other means, including meeting with them directly.
Okay. I want to make sure we have like 3 hours for this April 3rd meeting for this topic. Commissioner Smith?
So this survey, is that based on, why are we doing that?
Well, I think it was important to give people a background in the impetus for the original design standards that were adopted for the concept plans.
Right.
To talk about the design intent of those concept plans, and to make a clear comparison for people between those standards and what we currently use citywide instead of that. And that has to do largely with garages and whether garages are required to be on the rear or side of a house or oriented off an alleyway, and requiring alleys. And so you've already heard some testimony about this from the development community and.
Right, and on our last discussion of this, it was only brought up by the development community and the mayor, and nobody else in this entire process, and that triggered a survey?
We were asked by the commission to reach out to the community to get feedback on that. And so we reached out to.
What are all these meetings for?
We did a special reach out on just that topic as directed by the city commission.
I don't remember the city commission directing you, directing to go forward with some
Actually-
survey about this topic.
Not
It
the
was
survey
clear to
specifically.
go out to the neighborhoods and get information. We didn't tell them how to gather that
Let's just
information.
find that. I mean, we did that, that's what the concept plan is.
Yeah, I think the question in front of the commission is if you remove these chapters for these specific housing, does
We're
it
not going
still-
to, because staff isn't recommending us to, and no one has recommended us to, except for 3 letters at one meeting after this entire process has gone through. Staff isn't recommending removing those.
Staff did, it was not part of the planning commission decision, and so what we wanted to do was get meaningful input on that since it wasn't in all of the meetings prior.
And where are
And
we
one of the
seeking this
methods was-
input?
What's that?
Where are we seeking this input? Citywide or just within the areas impacted?
Well, one of the first questions is, where do you live? Do you live in the Park Place concept plan area? Do you live in the neighborhood? Or do you live citywide? So we can
We-
tell that.
We,
But-
we reached out to all the neighborhood association chairs, the CIC. We reached out specifically to the neighborhood associations that these impact, although one of them is not functioning at the moment, so their neighborhood next door is taking care of them. So we reached out to both of them to let them know what the proposal is before the city commission or what the request was. I don't think that there is no red line changes to change the code at this point. I think what I heard the commission say is go out to the public and get meaningful input on if this is a good idea or not, since it came so late in the process. And so that's what we attempted to do. And then one of the things includes the survey, and I think the survey is good because it's complicated since we're comparing which code criteria implements this vision of a concept plan or not. And so we utilize pictures to do so. But we haven't released the survey yet, we're just finalizing it now. We could not release the survey if the commission decides, but it was just another avenue to get more input through social media and things like that.
I just think that the design standards in the concept plans are there from an entire massive citizen process. We've been through a massive citizen process for the planning commission, but this issue didn't come up. We went through a part of it with this commission, and it didn't come up except for 2 letters and the mayor. And that now triggers this. I just find that a little bit much, because basically we're gonna get these surveys back, and these surveys, we don't know, I don't necessarily know how it's targeted or where it's going or what's coming back. And that is going to then weigh against what is an issue from just a couple people, and has not been an issue for anybody, and is negating years and years of work on 2 concept plans. I find that just absolutely shocking.
I'm actually,
That's all I need to say, but I don't know how we got there.
I'm actually fine without doing a survey and letting this commission do its due diligence and go to those respective areas and see what we're talking about in terms of impact.
And these people are sitting in the audience, I mean, they're coming to these meetings.
Yes, and we also reached out to all the participants for both the concept plans as well.
I don't think it's a good idea.
If I may, Mayor. I remember the conversation that we had at our last commission meeting, and when this came up, Mayor Holliday expressed an interest to remove the chapters. And we have received additional letters of public comment since this came up, saying that yes, some minor modifications, like to the garage requirement, makes good sense just for housing types and what people are building today, and the concept plans were done quite a number of years ago. I don't necessarily think we have to do a survey if that makes you feel a little bit better, but I did specifically ask that before we make any decisions on that both Park Place and South End definitely had a chance to review this whole thing. It was a surprise to me at the last commission meeting when it came up as in something for us to consider. And so I definitely was not prepared to make any decision on those particular chapters without getting input from the neighbors. So I think it's a good idea. If all the neighbors come out and they say, we don't want to change it, then I'm totally fine supporting the neighborhoods and saying, the neighbors have spoken and we'll do what they want. But, I think there were some good points made in the letters, and I'm not going to just throw them out maybe with the bathwater kind of thing just because it came from a developer or other people who build houses for a living and have some good thoughts on it. So, I just want to hear all sides of the conversation, and this allows us to get comments from Park Place and South End. If they have thoughts on it, then let them bring their thoughts. But I certainly wasn't ready to make a decision on, what we had last time, so.
So how long ago was the South End concept plan done?
2013,
2013.
Okay, and Park Place?
2008.
Okay. Commissioner Smith?
So I don't at all negate wanting public input. I just think the survey is very specific, and we're gonna get all the letters, we're gonna go through the letters like every letter that comes in, and every citizen that comes to these meetings in this whole process that we're still carrying out all the way through April. I don't understand why that was so specific. I think I do understand why it was so specifically focused in on, but I don't think we need to go there. I think we're gonna get the input from the citizens coming to these meetings. I know that, looking at this audience, most of the people sitting there are from Park Place. or Kenema. Well, I see one from Kenema. So, I mean, a couple from Kenema. But the citizens are gonna come through this process. That's what this process is. I don't get why we already have enough information to go through and all this input. We're gonna weigh that with a bunch more surveys and stuff. I just think it's overdone.
So if the survey hasn't been sent yet, then perhaps we don't need the survey. I do like the idea of going to the neighborhoods and letting them know that this has come before the commission. My thing is the neighborhoods need to know that this was an issue that was brought for the commission. We received a request to remove chapters of our code. And I want to make sure that those neighborhoods are informed that this was public comment we received. This is something we are deliberating. I have no idea where we're gonna land on it, and I want, one, to make sure they're informed, and two, a chance and opportunity to provide public input. It could be that we end up leaving it exactly like it is and we all go on our happy way. And so if a good compromise, we don't need the survey. If we think that we can get the good public input and comment that we're looking for without the survey.
I'm fine either way. I'm just a little confused because as I recall, it was Commissioner Rocky Smith who said we needed to go back and talk to the neighborhoods about this.
I'm fine with
We
talking
can
to
talk to
the
the
impacted
neighborhoods every
neighborhoods.
single night we are at a meeting.
No,
I did not say,
that is not the, and excuse me, Commissioner Smith, that is not the case, okay? The neighborhood associations have a very small representation of the actual number of citizens that live within those boundaries. So if you want to get a real representation of the folks who live in the Park Place area and in the South End area, the survey would be a way to get a more scientific, a larger sampling, other than just those activists that show up at neighborhood meetings.
well, the question, I guess the basis of my frustration is really, you can make a survey get you whatever information you want. It's the way the question's asked. Is the question gonna be, do you wanna remove these sections from the concept plans? Or do you want a garage that does this, or do you want that? I mean, opening the door to that, you're very much directing the input you're getting back. And that input we're getting back is then gonna negate years and years of work that went into concept plans by people that actually understood it all and didn't just look at a picture and say, I like this better. That's two different things.
Well, and to get back, and I'm not gonna argue the point, but to get back to what we're talking about is you're talking about severely limiting the ability for people to build what they want.
I'll
Limiting
comment.
it to 4 or 5 different particular styles. Now, we don't do that anywhere else in the city. All I am saying is we ought to have one residential design center standard for the entire city. And maybe you make an exception for McLaughlin and for Kenema. I don't know about that. But as far as building out the rest of the city, why are we picking out a particular area, especially the South End? There's, a very slight amount of, historical inventory in the South End neighborhood. Much of that was built in the 40s through the 90s and 2000s. There are numerous different building styles. Whether we're talking about Gaffney Lane, which was primarily ranch style at the time, because ranches were, the rage at that particular point. We have whole neighborhoods of split levels. I don't understand why we are trying to limit ourselves architecturally to 4 or 5 things.
Well, I guess it's my turn, and I'll respectfully disagree with the mayor. I feel like there's certain specific areas that are impacted. I listened to Pete describe the survey, and it makes no sense to me either logistically or from a cost viewpoint. If you're gonna tell me we're gonna send out a citywide survey and we're gonna discard all those that are not within the impacted area, I think we're talking about, there's some very specific areas. They should have the say in what their area looks like. And we shouldn't impose an overall design standard or removal design standard citywide. So I don't need a survey to do that, and if I do, it would be very limited to the areas impacted and not citywide.
Are you guys clear on your direction on this?
Probably not.
Yes, we will not,
Probably not.
Because I'm pretty clear. It sounds like we don't want to do the survey.
we hear you clear.
Okay.
I would still suggest that you have presentations at the Park Place and South End neighborhood associations and do whatever other outreach that you can do without that.
We've done all the outreach.
Okay.
I have a final question unrelated to this,
Go ahead.
but go ahead.
Yeah, mine's related to process of going forward. So for all of the meeting we had last time and tonight, we've talked about, you've brought to us things that were, major discussion points for the planning commission and for us to consider. But we are not making any decisions at any time. And so at least that I can see. So this April 3rd meeting where you say final direction, this list is just going to keep growing. Where
That's correct.
everything that we're leaving unfinished business is gonna be tackled
That's right.
that
Right.
night.
That was the
plan-
direction given to staff.
And my plan for that is,
Yes, it
once we've
was.
gone through these preliminary discussions, and that's why I asked for 3 hours,
Okay.
is that we're gonna take these one at a time, we're gonna hash them out, we're gonna vote on them, and then when we get done, we're gonna have the decisions for the entire package.
Final
Yes.
recommendations.
Okay.
Okay. And so,
One
one
more
other thing,
comment,
so,
she's done.
then you can go to,
Thank you.
can you go back a couple of slides, the March 6th? So I'm a little concerned about this section of stuff. There's some heavy topics in there. Shelters and mobile food carts, for one. I guess it's just a comment. You're just gonna present information like you've done before. But I guess I wanna make sure that we have a good amount of public input on these things. And I feel like we're kind of stacking the deck pretty heavy on this one day, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. I'm a little concerned about this day.
So what we've done is, the planning commission did how many hearings? 5, 6?
13?
Yeah,
think
including
13.
work sessions.
Yeah, so there have been, numerous occasions for the public to have the opportunity to comment on this stuff. And when planning brings it back to us at this meeting, what they typically are doing is bringing us the 4 or 5 things that the planning commission either couldn't agree on or was a major topic of discussion in these sections. So a lot of this stuff is going to be just gonna be, we're just gonna go through. Probably won't even talk about some of this stuff.
I guess we'll find out.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
So I may have missed it because I have not completed the Evelyn Wood speed reading course. But my recollection was that in the affordable housing discussion, we were going to discuss lot averaging, and I didn't see it in there anywhere.
Okay.
What night does that occur on? Or was it, where are the 2 words,
Is it
lot
March 16th?
averaging?
So it'd be land divisions. I think we would do that under March 20th.
I wouldn't know.
Make sure we add that in.
Yeah.
so-
Would appreciate it. That was the agreement.
Okay.
It's listed under it should be listed under procedural
Yeah.
improvements, so it's on the list. It doesn't say specifically the words lot averaging, but it does talk about land divisions and minor partitions. And then processes.
Show me the words.
Okay, we'll add the words to the
All
list.
right.
Okay, so is that the end, Pete?
Yes.
Okay, so we are on to now, public testimony. The applicant, the staff report's already done. So, 3 minutes for any individual, 5 minutes if you're a representative of a neighborhood, association that has given you the authority to speak on this subject. And waiting for my packet. We'll go with Patty Webb and Jim Nocita.
Hello, I'm Patty Webb, and I'm from Kenema. Sorry about this handwriting, but I scratched it out on the way home. I'm very concerned about the regulations for ADUs, mainly because I've seen a lot of regulations fall by the wayside, and they're not enforced. The regulations are only as good as enforcement. In Kenema, we are being overrun with Airbnbs, bed and breakfasts, whatever you want to call them. This worries me because I don't have any way of knowing if they're registered. I really don't think any of them are registered. I haven't been able to get a straight answer from code enforcement. I haven't been able to get the regulations. I've been passed back and forth between planning and code enforcement several times on these, telling me there are no regulations, they don't know what they are. At one point, I was told that if it was 30 days or more, it was considered a rental, 30 days or less, it's a B&B. I got online today and I was able to find 7 within like 5 minutes. They don't list their addresses or their phone numbers because they know they're not registered and they're doing the wrong thing. One of them, I was able to recognize the house, advertises that they're right next to the dog park, meaning the Kanemagal Bluffs, which does not allow dogs. There is one site called Tiny Float Houses, and this is what they say. There are a whole line of B&Bs down on the river below Kanema in the houseboats there. Tiny float houses. Have you ever dreamed of extending your waterfront estate with a cottage, boathouse, or deck house? There are many large houseboats available, but we offer vessels suitable for the private estate, lake, pond, or restricted canal. Often, waterfront property has restrictions about building fixed structures. A tiny float house is not fixed. It's your boat and can be moved if needed. So basically, they're telling them how to get around the building codes and the habitation of these neighborhoods, meaning Kanema. With 7, I estimate there's between 10 and 15. That's over 10% of my neighborhood. And on party days, graduations, weddings, you cannot get up and down my street. A fire engine cannot get to the homes in my neighborhood, nor can an ambulance. In the mornings, you see damage to the rock walls that support my property. There's drink glasses up and down the street, used napkins, garbage, flash bulbs that some of the photographers still use. And this is the type of thing you'd expect to see in a commercial area with a hotel, not a residential district, especially a historic one, which Kanema is an historic district. Thank you.
You. Cecile.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jim Nacito, Oregon City. I wonder if the Commission might consider whether it might be possible and desirable to prioritize the development of equitable and affordable housing in Oregon cities such that those areas along transit lines are preferred over those areas that aren't. I've been thinking about a lot of reasons for this, but I'll go over a couple of them. And then basically be the mixed-use downtown zones and the mixed-use corridor zones. Most of Malala and Beaver Creek going up the hill is mixed-use corridor. One reason I think is, as far as affordability, folks that have limited means, having rent and a vehicle costs, maintenance, gas, etc. That's more of a financial burden than if someone who requires affordable housing can have that housing where they can step outside their door and have a bus pass on TriMet. I think that'd be much more preferable to have more of that type of housing and to be able to, which is the second reason actually, where you have densities such that you can have transit be a very viable option, then I think it's more practical, and this is one of the things I was talking with Laura about over the weekend at the retreat. It's much more practical to waive, for example, the requirement that each individual dwelling unit have an automobile space. Out in the further, areas of the city, obviously, if you can't walk to a bus stop, you're going to have to require more and more cars. Whereas if you're in an area of transit, you don't really have to do that as much. And a third reason that I can think, a third reason is if you do that, then you can give TriMet an expectation that those areas are going to be the more developed and dense areas. That gives them the expectation that providing better bus service is more of a practical proposition. And then fourth, I would just add, obviously, the imperative of climate change and having less reliance on cars and more reliance on transit. So, and the mixed-use downtown area, I certainly support waiving or having higher structures in the north end, north of 10th and 11th. A cluster of taller buildings right around that downtown transit center, I think would be, a very desirable objective. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, Paul Edgar and Tom Guile.
Paul Edgar, Oregon City. I'd sent an email off recently to Pete, and I do a lot of efforts in trying to arrive at solutions to homeless veterans and homeless people. And as I went through this, one of the veterans cannot finance a manufactured home unless it's on owned land. Yet, when I went down to take a look at a manufactured home just across 205 by, on 213, there's a site there, and I talked to them, and they sell manufactured homes there that are made in Oregon, could be made right in Oregon City if we got our on the ball in economic development. But these homes can be bought for $50,000. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, look good. They can be handicap accessible. But if we could put them on a lot, and the lot costs $10,000 or $20,000 for a micro lot, a high density lot, and it doesn't, R2 or less in the high density mode. And we've ruled out in this code thing saying we can't have manufactured homes in high density. But in reality, I can then supply the marketplace can supply a home for $70,000 that is quite terrific. When I go out and build a high-rise unit for equitable housing, like what Clackamas County is doing on Audie Road and 205, those are coming in at $300K a piece, and the taxpayers' money that's involved into each one of these units is about half. The Veterans Housing Project that's going up here off of Molalla and Present, that's $7 million for 24 units. That's just under $300,000 per unit. That's all public money, one way or another. What I'm asking for in somebody, and I don't have any skin in this other than I'm working for solutions that we as society can afford, that it won't bankrupt the taxpayer. And when we put into our code and exempt the ability at high density to having affordable housing that's manufactured, just that's made in Oregon, we are hurting ourselves. I think it's wrong. These clustered housing units can be designed in a manufactured home park mindset with a center and with porches around it and amenities. And we can achieve things like this. The Oregon Community Housing Authorities have funds available for us to make targeted hits.
You're out of time, Mr. Edgar.
I'm just asking that for your consideration to have this a discussion item. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Guile?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tom Guile, Oregon City. I originally prepared some comments, but then everything changed tonight. I found out that it wasn't just specifically about Park Place or South End, but I wanted to address a couple things. I'm a Portland Metro person. I've lived in Southwest Portland, Northwest, but spent more time here in Oregon City than most of the other areas. And since I've been here, from 25 days after I moved in and someone brought me a brochure about Park Place, I've attended all those meetings. So this may have been a concept plan adopted in 2008, but actually it took several years of charrettes and group discussions and meetings of how we were going to design this. What do you want in this area? What do you want? We went through so much before it, and we all argued. We argued even at the concept plan. It still got agreed to by the majority. And then it went through elections. And it went through one election, as you've heard me say, 67% said no in 2008, 56 in 2010, then again 62%. So moving forward to this day, we are now went through the planning process and then to the city commission, and 95% of the people in the room was usually packed, were against it. Yet at the same time, they started getting fewer and fewer people here because they didn't feel they were being listened to. Here we are. Most people are feeling now it's a bait and switch. They had all those years from 2008, the developers and people who own the land, to make changes or request it. And the next time we bring it up, let's make these changes to it. Now, all of a sudden, after it's been passed for annexation by planning and city, now they want to make some changes to it. And our concern is it's like a bait and switch. Here's what we wanted to do, we'll get it through, and then, look, we're going to make changes to it. The reason I conveyed all that history is because it just seems like it's taken forever and ever to make this decision. Each one of you, as we were sitting in the room, said something really important to the discussion. But citizens come to the meetings. They used to come in droves, but now they don't. And anybody who reads on some of the sites I admin say it's not worth coming because no one really listens to us. So I'm not sure when you say that Park Place and South End will come in here and testify and give their thoughts, that they'll actually show up, because I think a lot of them feel it's waste of their time. I know in Trailview, I've tried to get every one of those people out. I seem to be the mouthpiece for my neighborhood, at subdivision of Trailview, because they all said it's not worth it. No one's going to listen to us. You mentioned, Dan, Mayor, 4 to 5 designs. And I kept thinking, okay, now we've got the airport design, and those are several different designs. People got to come in and choose. So I wasn't quite sure what you meant by only 4 to 5
You
designs.
should look at the
I will again.
documentation, because it shows them.
I will again. The big thing about the survey was the fact that I thought, first I've heard about the survey tonight, and it said we would ask them where they're from. Well, anybody could respond and say they're from Park Place or South End unless they give an actual address. The big thing that I wanted to finish up with is,
You're out of time too, Tom.
I can't be.
You are.
Oh, one final thing. If they're gonna build, if this is based on affordability, which we at the Plan Commission discussed and all that, then we'd all like to see some numbers. How will this provide, making these changes, affordable homes? How is that gonna meet what we are trying to achieve?
Okay.
Okay, thanks a
When-
lot.
When you're looking at those design standards for the Park Place neighborhood, I'd like you to look at your own house and see if your house could be built to one of
Exactly
those
to
standards.
those. Okay.
Because
I
I
will
don't
do
think,
that.
I don't think it could.
I may have missed that because as Frank said, and you can tend to go blind reading all that information.
Oh, I know. All
I
right, thanks,
appreciate
sir.
it. Thanks. Have a good evening.
Amy Wilhite.
Tom is staying,
This
he
is
has
not
more
my
to say, I'm sure.
Amy Wilhite, citizen of Oregon City. When Ms. Turway mentioned that the CIC and the neighborhoods had been informed about the concept plan, perhaps parts being removed, I had to double take because I don't remember that. So I went back in my emails, and now I remember because I read it and I thought, what is that? It was very confusing. And having sat in the meetings, the email specifically talks about that you'll be talking about this issue on March 20th. And if they would like to hear from the neighborhoods, and so please send to Pete Walter your stuff by March 6th so it can get on the agenda. It never says come to a meeting. You talked about it tonight, March 20th, so I think the dates, they're fluid, I understand that. South End meets the third Thursday of March. That'll be their next meeting. Park Place doesn't have another general meeting until May. So I'm not quite sure how you think you're going to reach out to those folks. You could, for South End, their chair is currently working at a job that doesn't allow him to participate in a lot of the meeting. He doesn't come to the CIC and he's not able to. So I'm not sure that this email alone he'll understand exactly what he's being asked to do. There would be enough time to reach out and ask to be on their agenda in March, I imagine, if they have if their agenda is not full, and that information could go on their postcards, therefore reaching out to the citizens. But if I'm just a citizen in South End or in Park Place, and this email that just went to, I don't know who it went to because you blind copy, but I'm assuming it came to me as a chair, whether that was the CIC or the neighborhood, I'm not sure, but I don't get from this that you're really looking for public comment. It talks about it, that you've received letters asking for these standards to be removed, and you'll be discussing if they should be removed. Makes it sound like it's a big deal because it says there's several have been removed. I'm just shocked, sitting in the audience, hearing the number of requests for them to be removed versus the amount of time that went into this. And so I would just encourage you, if you want to change, I think you need a lot more public comment than this little email, hoping that that's going to get the comment of the people that set that up. That's just my opinion.
Thanks, Amy.
As you heard at the retreat, Amy, our challenge is communication and getting the message out, and it still remains that. And the number one vehicle, I still think, is social media. And we continue to struggle. You know, we need to go to those people, and those people need to come to us. So how do we accomplish it? And I've not been satisfied with the results.
Yeah. It's all of our question.
Yeah.
My question is for Ms. Turway and Mr. Walter. I've emailed with you asking you specifically about the outreach that was going to be done. So perhaps you can comment on, I was under the impression from the email that you were actually planning to have meetings, and I followed up asking for the dates and times so that I could attend and hear the comments in person. So I'm confused by the conflicting statements. Perhaps you can shed some light.
Sure, there's been a few different things that have happened. So what I heard at the last commission meeting was to get meaningful comment in a lot of people. So from that, we sent out an email to CIC members, all neighborhood association chairs, letting them know that there was a proposal from the public to amend the chapters, and we put the dates of the meeting in accordance with our schedule, and we asked for their input, and I requested that they email Pete, as Amy had read. I had a couple of conversations. I reached out to the past chair of Park Place because I didn't have the current chair's phone number, so I talked to him quite a bit. And then I also talked to the chair of Park Place quite a bit as well, and we offered to come to meetings. I think he's going to be getting back to me, but I also had more conversation with Park Place members and identified that we would be happy to come to any meetings and talk to them about it. So I need to follow, the Park Place chair is going to follow up with me on specifically which dates we would be available. From the date he offered, or maybe it was Tom, identified it was before the meeting date. So it would have all worked out. I don't know.
So a special meeting would be called.
They're not extensions of the city, so I don't know what their meeting, if it was just with steering committee or general. So
It's up to them.
but we did offer to meet with them and had conversations about it with both the current chair and the past chair. We sent emails to the the other South End concept plan is in the Hazel Grove Westling Farm Neighborhood Association. That neighborhood association currently has no chair or vice chair or anything like that. So what is happening is the South End Neighborhood Association is sending mailing notices to all those people. So it's sort of a buddy system. So we did reach out over email because we didn't have the phone number to the South End Neighborhood Association, letting them know that we wanted to talk about it and could show up to their meetings too. So we're available to do that. We also sent the email out to everyone who participated in the concept plans. We had the email list from when we created them, which I think Pete created both of them, and he's doing this, so that's good. And we set up an online survey that we were going to send out on social media to get more perspectives on it using pictures and stuff. And we were trying to be as even and non-leading as possible. And so we haven't released it yet, but it sounds like the desire is not to do so.
We
That was
asked
our
our
goal.
communications coordinator to take a look at the questions because we didn't want them to be overly difficult. She recommended that they be at a 4th or 5th grade level and that they have lots of pictures in them. So we've been designing that survey for about 3 days. And we want to release that. And then, yes, we are available to go out and meet with any group. And we just need to get a date, so.
So
Yeah.
here, this is fundamentally different from what I understood the survey to be. So when I heard survey the first time, I'm thinking, mailing stuff out to people, having them fill out some form, mailing it back. This seems more like, if it's all online, I don't see any issue with, having, apparently it's not gonna cost very much money, I wouldn't think.
No.
What is the problem with being able to genuinely get more public input? I mean, obviously, and I've said this for a long time, real genuine public input throughout the community is not gonna happen through the neighborhood association because not enough people show up at neighborhood associations to be a real representative of their individual neighborhoods.
Is the survey based, is it relating to all these concepts or just this one issue?
Just this one issue.
See, that's why I find that bizarre.
We've done prior surveys before
I
for
mean,
this
why are we
package.
calling out one issue that didn't even come up through this entire process? We haven't done this with every other issue that we brought up.
Well, and take a
We're
look at.
basically putting a red flag out to the public, to every single person who, to point this out, and it hasn't been an issue at all
And the
until the
initiating-
last meeting that we've had. So I guess I don't mind looking at the comments, but giving a huge amount of weight to that versus a chart, 2 different concept plans that went through extensive processes. We're gonna have a survey that negates that. I think that's, we have to see the weight in that.
Well,
That's my problem.
I
I mean,
mean, you
if
want
this was-
public input or you don't.
Well, do it, fine, do it, and then we can discuss how it weighs when it gets here. But the fact that we're calling out one issue that clearly was only raised by a small amount of people at one last meeting, and without going to details of why they supported it, I think it's bizarre.
And you're entitled to your opinion.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, it was initiated by a small group with a special interest, and that was a
Absolutely.
that was a building group. Those letters come from builders. And I'm respectful of those areas with historical nature. I don't agree with having the entire city respond to something that doesn't affect them specifically. I want public opinion, I just don't, I would rather go to meetings and talk to people and engage them. I mean, I am willing, if these meetings become a reality, if you hear and I don't, please let me know, because I want to go. But I mean, it's an honest discussion. How did this come to be? What do you see as the impact? What is the impact in your area? And I don't think it should be a citywide discussion. I think if your area is historical in nature, and maybe those areas immediately adjoining that need to reflect that, and as you get further away, that these things don't. So to summarily impose it across the board, honestly, I think that's a special interest type of move, and I want to do it right.
I think you made part of my point for me, is that a great majority of the land that we're talking about isn't in a historical neighborhood, isn't part of, and Pete, talked about this at the last meeting, that there are over 100 years of different architectural styles in both South and Park Place.
Then let's go back and redo the concept plans. I have no problem with that if that's the issue, but removing a thing after this whole problem, that's 2 separate issues. I'm not negating that there's issues that you're bringing that are not factual. I'm saying the process of how we're going about it is bizarre. I mean, if we have an issue with design codes that are listed in 2 concept plans that have taken years to put through, then go back and fix them.
And-
Don't do it through this one little thing at the last minute after this whole process has gone through.
And ultimately, the city commission's responsibility is to fix the issues that come up
Then
through the
let's do it.
process.
Then
And
let's
that's what
do
we're
it.
talking about doing.
So let's bring the concept plans back and go through that and forget this.
Well, that's not gonna happen.
Well, there you go. Either is the survey.
Okay. So apparently no survey. Is there any further public comment? And I'm gonna close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we will then table this to the March 6th meeting.
Are there any other items you want us to add to the list? We can continue the items that we identified as the top for the planning commission, add more, subtract them. I just want to make sure that I'm clear that the items to be continued.
The items to be continued are the items that we discussed tonight.
Correct.
That's it.
You mean the items that you had on that slide
Yeah. can
of
you
the
go back
top,
to the slide?
the top issues?
All four. I don't think there was.
We can continue all of the items that were identified. Can you go back? Sorry. I just want to make sure, it sounds like these 4 items that were the top items for planning commission discussion, we will add to the list. Are there any other that we need to add?
No.
Is that correct? Okay, just want to make sure we're clear.
Okay,
Thank you.
so we're moving on. Only thing we have under general business is 19-110 restroom placement project at Chapin Park. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. This is a continuation item from the January 16th commission meeting. During that meeting, presented was information on a restroom replacement at Chapin Park. The restroom was placed sometime in the 1970s and has outlived its useful life. One of the questions that came up during the commission meeting was the exclusionary items in the contract. And so presenting information on the exclusionary items, we anticipate roughly $5,500 worth of exclusion items will also be required in order to complete the work for the project. Of that, approximately 3,500 of it is in permitting and fees. The other roughly 2,000 is in site work, asphalt work, and some minor landscaping. With that, I will answer any questions as you may have them.
So that answered my question. Did that answer your question from the other night?
Phil's letter to us answered exactly what we needed to hear, costs and offsetting revenues. Yes.
He's never missing another meeting.
Well,
my first meeting.
He has an agenda item, I'll tell you that. All right, so no act, this is not an action item. You just
Yes.
needed some,
I think we need
it
to
is an
approve
action
the
item.
contract.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 19-110 restroom replacement project at Chapin Park.
Seconded.
For discussion, call the roll.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye. So we already pulled one thing from the consent agenda. I assume you don't have anything else that you want to pull? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda, excuse me.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye. Mr. Manager?
Katie, I'm sorry, I have another question. So when I voted, it was Rachel's name, and when Rachel voted, it was her name. So I hope we're making sure the votes connect when,
Yes.
okay. Well, obviously tonight, it doesn't, but for this vote, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, we all voted
But,
yes.
yeah, I want to make sure that we're
They are.
entering the
Our wires
right, because
crossed.
it wasn't showing up that way.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Mr. Manager?
Just as I had discussed with the Urban Renewal Commission tonight on the dais before you is the comprehensive annual financial report findings from Marina and Company LLP, which does our audit of both the city budget as well as the urban renewal budget. And the auditors issued an unmodified or clean opinion. So congratulations to Wyatt and Finance Group in preparing that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact myself or Wyatt after you've had a chance to look at that. That's all I have for tonight.
Commissioners, Dang?
I do not.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you.